You ever feel like that thing you worked hardest for still let you down? Well, that's exactly what happened to Dr. Benjamin Ritter. And what happened next is the reason we had this conversation. From training 3 times a day to become a professional soccer player, to losing it all and questioning who he was without that identity, to coasting through his career until a walk to work hit him like a brick wall, Ben's journey is one you're going to feel in your gut. Ben and I discuss how fear disguises itself in high achievers, why rejection and failure hurt so deeply, and why they don't mean what you think. The safe place that changed everything for Ben. How to use fear as fuel instead of a brake. What happens when we mistake performance for purpose. And how to reclaim the direction of our life. And most importantly, how to start becoming who you actually are, not who the world told you to be. This conversation is packed with insight, clarity, and tools for anyone stuck between what looks successful and what feels true. Ben's passions include working with small business founders and minority-owned companies, for which he offers pro bono coaching services. Born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, Ben now resides in Austin, Texas, with his partner Tiffany, Squirt, a rebel in a shell, turtle, Elwood, a scruffy rescue pup, and Sima, the kitty queen of their kingdom. Ben has a doctorate in organizational leadership, but focus on value congruence and job satisfaction. An ICF PCC certification, an MBA in entrepreneurial management, and an MPH in health policy administration. Here's my conversation with Dr. Benjamin Ritter. Hey guys, it's Ryan. I just want to take a moment and say thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to the show. The way that people hear about this show is just through word of mouth. There's no other way at this point. And so if something resonated with you, share it with somebody. You can do that on social media or just text somebody. The link is always in the show notes. If you like what we're doing here, please share it with a friend. And thanks again so much for listening. Dr. Benjamin Ritter, welcome to the Personal Success Podcast.
Well, I feel so welcome. Thank you so much for having me, Ryan.
I just want to hop right in. We got this book I got right here, and I just want to tell you how much I enjoyed reading this thing. What inspired you to write Becoming Fearless?
Well, I think I could track down everything in my life from when I was unhappy to when I was happy to some aspect of if I gave into fear or if I faced my fears. And, you kind of hit those like pinnacle moments in your business and in your life. You're like, I think I have the thing that I want to share more to the world. And so I was running Live For Yourself Consulting. I'm a career coach for leaders, kind of like the whole self when it comes to a leader in their career and kind of taking more control of those reins that we tend to give away to organizations and to happenstance. And I just hit a little bit of a moment where I was working with enough clients and I was at a place personally where I was like, oh, it all comes down to fear. You're like reflecting on your story and when you didn't take that turn and you didn't do that thing and then you did do that thing and you have enough little moments in your life where you're like, oh, shoot, that's the message I'm supposed to give. And so this idea that fear is just information, that fear can be used, it should be used intentionally to help you achieve your goals. Well, despite fear or with fear, because fear can be good or bad, depending on how you interpret and use it, really just resonated with how I've lived my life and how I coach clients to live their lives. And I'm sure we'll go into my personal story a little bit, but that's kind of why I put it out there and hoping to create more fearless leaders, more fearless professionals, more fearless people in the world. Because I think if we can get out of our own way and just do the things that we want to do, we are able to at least knock on every door of possibility. Some open, some don't, but the world opens up to us.
So there's this analogy that you hear a lot on a lot of podcasts. It's like, hey, 10,000 years ago, we had to be scared of a tiger jumping out of a bush, and so we have that same sort of nervous system. And so sometimes things cause anxiety or fear because we're scared of that tiger still. And that analogy, I'm like, okay, that gives you a general idea, but I just wonder, in the leaders you work with, what are we fearful of?
Well, there are a lot of different types of fears, but generally they come down to a fear of loss. So it could be a fear of a loss of a brand. People are not going to like me. People are not going to think I'm good at this thing. And generally, it's a loss of a job. I mean, overall, it's just this thing that it's this idea that something's going to be taken away from us. And then we're going to have to deal with that pain and deal with that kind of fallout. And we think that the risk of doing the thing, the risk of having that taken away, of that loss, generally becomes magnified in our brains because we're afraid of losing more than we are excited about gaining. And so we don't do the thing. We don't speak up in the meeting. We don't go ask our boss for feedback. We don't give feedback to someone that we are managing as a direct report. We don't put our hand up when it comes to taking on additional work. We don't set boundaries so we can go home and have dinner with our family because we're afraid of losing something that we perceive that we have.
So is there a general, what is it? Is it comfort? What are we scared we're going to lose there?
So it could be, I guess it could be comfort, but in some instances it's a job and people don't realize they can get another job. So it's money, it's respect. So that branding piece, which is they're going to think that I'm stupid. And then ultimately, it's funny, if you actually, in the career world, that tends to all come down to, I'm going to lose my job. So I don't raise my hand because all of a sudden now they're going to think that I can't do my job and then I'm going to lose my job. So generally in the professional world, it's I'm going to lose my job. In the personal world, it can be I'm going to be rejected. So I think ultimately, as we're sharing, it all comes down to this idea of I'm going to be judged in a negative way and lose something that I have in my life, relationship or position. So in a relationship, it could be friends, love, family, etc.
Yeah.
Growth opportunities.
So there's all different kinds of things that we're fearing, of sort of the sort of theoretical causes of if this happens, wow, that's an outcome I don't want, so I'm fearful. Just to play devil's advocate a little bit here, there is a study out there that I read. I used to be able to cite it, but I can't right now, that there are kind of two things that people don't really get over emotionally, right? And that is one is losing a child, which is, of course, understandable. Now that I'm a parent, I get that big time. And number two is losing a job. How does that fit in with this?
I would say I don't think we get over losses in general. And I think when we feel pain, that pain is part of us. It's part of our story. And there are moments of doubt and weakness or regret or reflection. You're like reminiscing on something and that pain can feel like it happened yesterday. Maybe not as severe as time goes on, but it can be depending on how well you can immerse yourself into that experience. So I don't know if we get over anything. Honestly, I think if we try hard enough, we can put ourselves back into that situation again. Losing a job is a big one. And we're actually seeing this more often now, at least as a coach and other coaches that I work with. Since 2020, there's been a lot of disruption. Like this resume of 5 to 10 years at one company and then 2 to 3 to 4 different jobs since 2020 because of the instability of the market. Maybe they took something because they were afraid it wasn't the right fit. And so now they look like they're not a really strong professional because they've had all these twists and turns that were external to themselves, or maybe there were some personal issues that happened. But now they're in this place today where they have all this past, I don't use the word, it's pretty strong, trauma from their past job losses. Because if you lose a position, even if you wanted to leave, you often will think that it's because of your skills, your personality, or some part of you that made that happen. Even if it's just, I picked the wrong thing, I can't pick the right thing. Actually, just talking to a client the other day who got let go, it was a reduction in force, a restructure of the organization. They picked his peer and did not pick him to stay. And now he has this seed of doubt that's planted within his mind to say that he's not good enough. And everything he did at that company was not good enough. And are the future employers going to think he's not good enough? And what if he never gets another job? Or what if the people that he's interviewing for call his other company and they tell him that he's not good enough? And so very much so that trauma never goes away, because no matter how many jobs he gets and how successful he is, he still was let go from that position and still wasn't good enough to stay.
What's interesting is I had a guest on this podcast before who was also a career coach in the Netherlands, and she said I don't have any kind of study or research to back this up, but she's like, most of the time people are let go, it has very little to do with them. It has to do with changes within the company. Is that something that you kind of touched on that at the end? Is there, without having any kind of actual research or anything, do you see a lot of that?
It is difficult at some organizations to be let go due to performance. It takes some time. It can happen. I mean, I was let go in my career, not due to performance, due to layoffs and restructuring. But more often or not, when I'm talking to people that were let go from an organization, it was due to them cutting a certain percentage of their workforce, or due to a restructure, or due to a purchase. And it's not always the case. So this is very much a generalization, but it's helpful to tell yourself the story that it wasn't because of you. And you hit on a really good piece of information there, Ryan, that your perception and the story that you tell yourself and how often you tell yourself it and how you reinforce it with information is more important than what actually happened. And a lot of people will be like, Ben, but you're living a lie. And I go, well, that lie serves me, so I'm happy with it. And I don't care if it was because of you. I don't care if secretly they're talking smack about you and they let you go in a room when they were trying to calibrate who to fire from a position. What is the belief that's going to get you excited and motivated for the next opportunity? What is the belief that's going to help you see yourself as a qualified candidate so when you go into an interview that other people believe you are? Because if you're going in there with the main belief that I'm not good enough and I'm not going to get this job, often are not going to create that perception in the other person that's talking to you, and they're going to believe that about you.
Yeah. I think the thing that was most shocking to me was how certain she was of this. She was like, I don't need research. This is just the way it is. Companies restructured, things like that. And it struck me because I guess what that sort of revealed about myself is I just kind of assumed that, every time somebody gets let go, it probably is based on their performance. And that probably isn't true. And she was even saying it to a larger degree. It's about the company. And she's like, even if it isn't, right? What is the point of looking at it that way? Because that's just going to kind of beat you down and your performance isn't going to improve on there. So I just remember, it's funny because I was just thinking about that. That struck me that she was so certain of this. And this is what she does for a living. She coaches people, kind of towards the executive level who get let go for one reason or another. So you talked about why you kind of came to the book, sort of professionally speaking, based on the work you do with clients. What is the personal story? What is your attachment and your experience with fear that makes this a resonant topic for you personally?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first job I ever wanted to be a professional soccer player failed miserably because of my fear.
Yeah.
Other people might be like, well, Ben, percentage-wise, you probably weren't going to make it anyways. And, that's my founding story. I'm sticking with it. Basically, I had an unbelievable obsession with wanting to be a professional soccer player. And when I say obsession, I mean practicing 3 times a day, like getting up at 4 a.m. to run on the beach. Like it could have been a movie. Like it could have put a film and recorded me, except in the end, I would have actually gotten the contract. I, played in college. I made decisions on where to go to school because of it. I went to London, tried playing for 6 months and played on a bunch of club teams. And, I had it was a really good movie. There were some really good story arcs. Like I had hip surgery the day before my 21st birthday. Like they canceled my major halfway through my school. So I went to go switch schools, but also to get on a better soccer team. I went there with this guarantee that I was going to get on and the scholarship. And lo and behold, it was honestly, I think it was my injury and also my mind did not perform as the way I should have. They didn't put me on the team. So I moved across the United States to go to a new school to play on a different team, promised with a contract and scholarship, and they took it away. And so there were a lot of these ups and downs. And that's actually where I found out, and I just learned about it a little bit too late, that my mind was more important than anything. The 3 practices a day, the eating a certain way, the lifting a certain way. I would only watch soccer on TV. It was like cassette tapes for most of it. I would read books purely about soccer if it wasn't for school. I should have studied how to be confident. I should have studied how to be fearless, because I would get onto that pitch because I cared so much about performing and about proving to people that I was good and better, that I failed, that I got in my own way, that I hesitated, that I couldn't show up. And I remember one day where I actually was in a state of flow where my mind, for some reason, took a little bit of a back seat and I didn't overthink, and I was amazing, to the point where the coach was like, wow, okay, starting position next time. And guess what? I got in my own way again. And through that disappointment, I then learned that my mind was the biggest roadblock, and I dedicated all that energy that I dedicated to soccer, and I dedicated it to learning how to get out of my own way and to grow my self-confidence and to stop being afraid. Because when I lost soccer, I lost who I was. I had no brand identity. I had no idea what I wanted to do in my career. A little bit of was floating, but now I had a new direction, which was to learn how to become confident. But that also was motivated by the fact that I was afraid of human connection. Because I only focused on soccer, I did not learn how to be social. And it's like these things that tie together. You're just like, what? What do you mean? Oh, if I focus completely on building a business, focus completely on growing in this company, and I forget about relationships, I'm going to be one awkward human. And I was afraid of approaching people. I felt like I was getting rejected. I felt like I was getting laughed at constantly. And I had to learn how to fix that. And that was all tied back to being afraid of rejection and failure. And so that led me down the path of studying personal development. And 4 or 5 years, I went out there and just said, I'm going to be fearless. And I tried everything. I mean, from jobs, I was a live cast model, which means they pour plaster over your body. So there's like 16 to 20 mannequins of me in the Civil War Museum in Kenosha. I worked in music festivals. I bartended. I did a lot of different things to taste life. Problem with that is you taste enough life, eventually you end up becoming confident, but then you still don't know what direction to go. And so that's where I started learning. I did a little bit of a career audit. I figured out where I wanted to go in my career. But after, again, being fearless, or I thought I was fearless, but lost. And then that there was a path in that direction that led me to coaching and leadership development and executive coaching. I'm happy to go there, but I'm going to pause for a moment.
Yeah, it seems like, as I'm listening to you, it seems like your kind of retrospective of this soccer career was like you didn't figure out how to beat fear. And if you would have, that was always kind of present behind all this. And so it's like almost like if you would have, the skill that would have actually got you there wasn't about the practicing and the sort of commitment. It was about the fear that was sort of driving that.
Yeah. And then to build on that, so out of school, I was figuring out what I wanted to do. I wanted to launch a business. I did everything to the point of launch and then was afraid. And so turned it down and did what most people do when they want to start a business, but unsure if they should. They go to grad school. And so I was in grad school and I was working hard and I found a new passion in health policy and I was going after it, and I faced a lot of career disappointment. So this is where kind of my fear gets interrupted again. I'm really confident. I'm going out there and putting myself out there, but the job that I get offered out of grad school gets cut due to federal funding. So I started in a position, they cut it. And then for 2.5 years, that happens to 4 other positions. And they just sign a contract, get ready to start. They cut the job, rinse and repeat. And no matter how fearless you are, if you experience disappointment, you start expecting disappointment. And you also just sometimes give up. And that's what happened. I ended up actually networking into a position working in a hospital in healthcare, and kind of forgot to be fearless and just instead decided to coast. You kind of like let go of the lessons that you know due to the lessons life decides to give you. And instead of learning, you just give up. And then I had another lovely experience where I was walking to work one day, looking around, and I was kind of like taken aback because I have this thing where I look in people's eyes. It's something I learned when I was trying to be social, and I realized that not everyone does it. And I was like, okay, maybe people think I'm a little weird. But I was walking to work and looking at everyone's eyes, and it just seemed like that day there was a lot of weight, like the weight that I was feeling to myself, where I kind of felt lost and like I've kind of given up on my professional life. Like it isn't supposed to be great; it's supposed to happen. I kind of saw that in other people, and I was like, look at these zombies. Like they're not enjoying life. Like I wouldn't want to be that person. And I kept seeing it in every single person I walked by, and then it hit me, and I stopped and I was like, oh, wait a second, that's me. And it was a pretty hard realization. Like, you think, shouldn't people know that they're in the wrong place, that they've given up, that they're not being intentional, that they're not following their values, that they're not being fearless, that they're just giving in to the day to day and coast and just kind of letting life, like they're in a raft and they're just letting life kind of push them to the left, to the right, or down the stream. And if they stop, they stop. And I was kind of stopped. I was like, oh, I should change this. Funny enough, I got selected for a leadership development training program. It was 16 months of leadership training. And I was paired up with the head of the program, the one who ran everything for all 13 hospital sites. And it was the first time in my career where since my decision to be fearless in soccer, that I forgot that I actually had a safe space to talk about what I went through. And that safe space, through the right questions, helped me realize one of the most important things was that by believing that I was in the wrong job, I gave up any opportunity to make it right. And that is a lesson that I use throughout my entire life since that day, which is what you believe is right about your situation, such as fear, is what you can use. And so I started thinking differently about my situation. I started paving the path towards a new career, something that brought me joy, something that I felt was important. And instead of being afraid of my boss, who was pretty toxic, I went to her and was like, hey, look, you know that thing you told me a couple weeks ago about not being energized enough, and maybe that I needed to smile more and that I should be more like Kevin, our coworker? Well, thanks for that feedback. I found out what I actually want to do, and I want to work more in talent development. And despite all of your negativity, I'm going to see it as positivity, and I'm going to use that to pave the pathway towards my career. And so I did. But lo and behold, we got acquired, and everyone I was working with in talent development got let go, and they were centralizing the position. So it's really neat about these speed bumps, because there's a lot of them in my career. Actually, in that position, I went through 4 different bosses, 2 different CEOs, and 3 different mergers in the span of 6 years. What's beautiful, though, is that happened. And you know what? I said, okay, I guess I got to go down a different path. Not, oh, woe is me, I have to give this up, or what, just kind of what happened to me initially after those disappointments. Realizing that you have power, you have control, and that if you're fearless and if you interpret information to serve you, that you can just make use of anything. And so then I ended up going back to get my doctorate in organizational leadership. I let go of everything else that I was focusing on at that time because it wasn't aligned with my values and where I wanted to go in life, and was just something I fell into instead of something I chose to do, and decided to be fearless towards my goals. Now, with the sense of clarity and with confidence, I took control over my environment, definition of self-leadership, and paved the path to where we are today. And up to now, I've been the head of talent development for a life sciences manufacturer. I've been a regional learning director for an organization called YPO. I've worked in learning. I've done workshops at conferences. I'm an executive coach for the CDC. I was invited to go speak at a leadership summit there. I'm living what I wanted to create from that point on. And it wasn't just that I was confident to go create it and fearless to make it happen, but I also knew the direction that I wanted to go, and I showed up differently in my environment to make it happen.
It's such an inspiring story. I think the experience I sort of get from reading the book, I sort of get that there was you don't touch on it in the book very rarely, but there was a lot of personal experience that sort of fueled into it. And it really resonated with me to hear what you said, especially when you talked about the sort of safe place to sort of process this. It kind of gave you some like a mile marker, like rest stop type place to kind of, okay, where have I been and where am I going from here? And I think that there's something important in that, because I think I'm listening to what you're saying, and part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast here is just, because I don't think there's just one definition kind of success. And I had this checklist that somebody gave me. It was like, make 6 figures, drive a fancy car, buy a house, get married. And like, I did all those things. And then I'm looking at the list being like, why am I so pissed all the time? That's like the short version of my story. But I had to sort of disassemble my life. And there was a lot of sort of time lost there until I found my own version of that safe space, where all of a sudden there was community, there was learning, and I was able to kind of reflect back, this is who is it that I am really? And I was close to 40 years old when this starts happening. And I just wonder, you speak to the significance, because you mentioned the word safe space, which kind of, I don't know, it seems like there's an intentionality behind using that phrase.
By the way, and if anyone's reading the book, each one of those strategies, there's 65 of them, is something that I personally experienced or was working with a client and they experienced. And I was like, oh, that's like a foundation. That's something critical. And so if you ever wonder what the story is behind the strategy, send me a note. I'm happy to share. Something really resonates with you.
Awesome.
So coaching is a funny industry because you can have really good coaches and really bad coaches. And you know what? Doesn't matter if they just shut up and listen. Sorry. So, and that was a little harsh in terms of the words, because I just think it's important that it doesn't matter what a coach does. They can't be more impactful by the type of questions that they ask and the way that they listen. But honestly, the beauty of coaching is that it creates an uninterrupted time if the client and coach are being respectful, where someone can just talk about the stuff that's on their mind and where they want to go. And that safe space is critical for everybody. And I think it's different than just talk therapy, right? Than just talking, because generally that's just downloading. And part of a safe space is, yes, I want to set context so I can get it out of my brain so I can understand it, and so that I can kind of be a little bit on empty so then I can fill up again. But that safe space generally needs to have some sort of prompt to lead you forward instead of backward, because I really don't care what happened to you. I care about what you want to happen to you. And if that's what being fearless really is, it's saying I'm not who I am or who I was. It's I am who I want to be. And that's only possible if we start asking ourselves questions in that direction. And there's a great book called The Road Less Stupid. I think it's by Keith Cunningham. And it's all about thinking time. Like, the number one trait of success that I found from studying CEOs and millionaires and billionaires and all those things is they take 45 minutes to an hour out of every day to sit down and think. They ask themselves questions and they answer those questions. And those questions generally are focused on problems or issues or things that they want to work on in their life. And that's not what you have to do. I'm not telling you to sit down for 45 minutes. I'm just saying that this is like a trait that very successful and wealthy people do. And a question that I get as an executive and leader coach all the time how do I create time to think? How do I create space to be strategic? Because you can't be strategic when you're just doing. It's like if you're in a burning building, you're not really worried what's on the news. You're worried about the burning building. When you're in a burning building, you're generally not worried about what you're going to eat later. And so you got to put out the burning building. And so if you're always in a burning building, then you're not going to be able to think about, well, how am I going to pay my bills next month? Or you're not going to want to. Or how am I going to grow this business that I care about? Or, wow, I'm really unhappy at my job. I probably should do something about this. I probably should fix this. And that's actually what toxic work environments or toxic relationships tend to create. They create so much drama and stress, at least internally or externally, that it prevents us to have an opportunity to realize that there's more, that there's a potential for change, and that we don't like this. I think that probably covers it.
Yeah, no, I think you're definitely right. I think that just, I'm a coach as well. And I think the hardest thing for me to learn was that the less you do, the better almost, because you're kind of just holding a frame for someone. And you're right. I think there's one level where you read a book and you're like, whoa, look at all this stuff that I found, like that someone told me. But then there's something different that happens when you find the stuff, right? And I think that's what it is. It's that space of, sitting with someone else's curiosity. And I think that was a tremendous life changer for me. And I guess without regret, I wish that I would have found it 20 years ago. It would have been so impactful and perhaps changed some things. But I do think that we just, like you said, it's about having that time to think strategically about what you're doing next, what you want it to mean to you, and so forth. And I think that there is so much power in that, power of self-discovery. I mean, how else are you learning about yourself if you don't have that time? I don't really know the answer to that.
Yeah. If you want to change anything in your life, there's two main things that you have to do. You need to invest time in learning the skill. You need to invest time in attempting the skill. And then you need to invest time in reflecting on what happened. And I did this with everything. I mean, the simplest example is I wanted to learn how to talk to people, that I was afraid of approaching strangers. Okay. So I studied what to say and how to be confident. I would write down things that I thought I could say. Then I went out and I said them. And then later that evening, I reflected on what happened. And too often, we get stuck in the learning phase. And I would actually say too often we get stuck in the I have a problem phase. And we just kind of ruminate on the fact that we have a problem. See, this leaders, so giving feedback is a big one here too. I can't tell you how many leaders have approached me and said, I have a hard time giving feedback. I have a hard time managing up to my manager. I have a hard time giving feedback to my direct reports. Great. What have you done so far to solve that? I've thought about it. And okay, great. Here's an article. Let's read the article. Great model. Now let's go. Let's practice the article together. Okay, now let's go. You feel comfortable? Go practice that with your team. Awesome. Now come back and let's talk about it. And before we talk about it, here's some prompts for you to reflect on the fact of what you just did. That's learning. And too often we just skip all those steps. We just go, I have a problem. I'm afraid of taking action on this problem. I have a problem. And we get stuck in that doom loop. That's kind of in the beginning of the book, which is what is fear. It just limits so much in our lives.
Yeah. I think it doesn't seem as crazy now, but I remember when I first worked with a coach, he had me make a fail list. This is kind of like, and he's like, what are 10 things that you're scared of? And, I'm like, well, I'm not scared of anything. I have no fear. And, I come up with 10 things that I think what just happened was the things I was really fearful of were kind of embarrassing to admit, right? I was single at the time, so I didn't want to be rejected. So like you said, I was stuck in that sort of phase of just, I got a problem. I wasn't reflecting or anything. And he sort of guided me to go, and he's like, okay, now just go and let's create a situation where you're just going to kind of fail. It wasn't anything like I thought it was going to be. Right. And part of it was because I think I had control, but there's something, without getting too meta here, I wonder if you can speak to this idea that the fear of fear is almost worse than kind of a baseline fear of something. I don't know. Do you see any truth in that in your work?
The fear of experiencing fear. So fear generally is the idea that something you're feeling is bad. So can you explain a little bit more about the fear of fear, maybe with an example?
Yeah, I guess it was, for example, I remember the one that seemed really, really wild to me was he's, and again, he asked for my permission for all this stuff too, but he's like, ask somebody out who you're instead of 90% sure they're going to say, yes, 90% sure they're going to say no. And I realized that, I was actually, what I was fearing in that was the actual like anxiety, the anxiety of leading up to that. It wasn't necessarily like the outcome, because I did have that happen, and it didn't, the outcome wasn't as terrible feeling as I thought it was going to be. So it was like I was aware of the anxiety or the fear that was going to, when I'm taking the walk up to this person, for example, but the actual outcome and doing the thing wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I don't know if that's clear at all, if that makes sense, Dr. Ritter.
Generally, we always survive unless we're physically hurt to the point that we can't. That fact is so important to instill within yourself if you're going to face a fear. It's that this person is going to say no. I know they're going to say no. I'm really afraid of them saying no and feeling the pain of them saying no because I think it's terrible. I think it's the worst thing that someone can experience, instead of the actuality, which is what you ended up realizing, is that you're still you, and they're probably going to forget that experience in a couple hours. No harm, other than you've had a learning opportunity. One of the fundamental beliefs, and this is a great segue into it, of facing your fear, is making a commitment towards whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. So in your instance, the commitment was, I'm going to approach someone. That's the commitment. Someone that I think is going to turn me down. Nothing along the path then towards that commitment should be bad, because it's just the path towards your commitment. That person saying no doesn't mean that you didn't approach them. It's just a byproduct of it. And most of the things in life that we want can be accomplished if we let go of the fear of the byproducts, the rejection emails, the rejections from people that we approach, the dismissals that we feel their dismissals within the corporate environment, not getting picked for a soccer team. They're just things that happen along the path of your commitment, and we just use them to define us. And honestly, like, facing your fear requires a little bit of thick skin, because you're telling yourself that, like, I'm okay, I'm going to be fine. And that's a lesson that I had the chance of learning really young when I lost what I thought was my everything, not making it onto, giving up, saying that I'm making this choice to stop trying, which is what happened. I think it's so important for us to experience that. Now, some people can experience a really strong failure in their life and then use it to define them from ever trying again. If you can make that switch to, oh, I've experienced a breakup. Have you ever been broken up before? Whew, what do you have to worry about? If you ever lost a job, what do you have to worry about? You can get a new relationship. You can get a new job. But we tend to focus on, we tend to focus on the negative, which is, that was really painful. That really hurt. I almost lost my house. Like, the really negative things. Instead of saying, okay, almost lost my house, save a little bit more. That was really painful. Maybe I need to realize that relationships are going to be painful. Or I'm willing to make that risk for falling in love. Or maybe there's something else. Maybe you end up dating 3 people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone creates their own safety nets when it comes to fear. So part of fear is committing and facing it and taking action, developing a strategy plan. Part of it is negating some of the fear, building a little bit of a safety net. Maybe it's a coach, support system, financial wealth, etc.
Yeah, I think you said it right on. What I didn't realize was happening was I made the commitment to approach this person, right? And so I committed to doing that. So it reframed the whole experience. But I think the trick was that it was experiential. It was like, okay, the actual goal is to approach them. It doesn't matter what they say. And it kind of introduced to me the possibility that you could have that kind of perceptive control. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a powerful thing for me to be able to see. But again, somebody listening to this who hasn't had that experience, or someone who reads that in a book, you have a very different kind of understanding of that when you've done it as opposed to when you've read it or heard it somewhere.
Yeah, and disclaimer, we're not talking about phobias or like severe fears that are ingrained within your consciousness or whatever it is. Like, this is not therapy. I'm talking about things in your life that are goals that you're afraid to take action on because of some perceived risk or fear. And the idea of being curious and learning and commitment can counter fear. So fear is a feeling it's a feeling that we then think about and then define as something bad. And so we're afraid of it. If instead we decide, I'm going to learn how to do X, Y, Z, I'm going to learn how to approach somebody and I'm going to commit to approaching 5 people a day, all of a sudden we've taken away the external validation piece, which is what we tend to be afraid of. Oh, I'm afraid they're going to reject me. I'm afraid I'm going to look stupid. I'm afraid that someone's going to see me and judge me. I'm afraid that I'm going to get slapped. I'm going to be attacked or whatever it is. And we take away that fear if we focus on the commitment and the learning piece. And I love how we kind of followed into the relationship examples. I actually tend to use them a lot in the corporate world because everyone tends to have relationships. And it actually was where I got my start in coaching, which is hilarious. That kind of led me to this path too.
Yeah. The relationship experiences is kind of funny because I felt strange sharing this experience. But I think it's kind of universal in a way. So let's talk about the book a little bit here. What are a few of your favorite strategies of the 65? Like when people ask you that question, what comes up?
Well, there's some that are a little bit more internal in mindset and some that are external. One that comes up that is internal, and I'll share one external, is that work is never supposed to be done. So if we're talking about the professional environment, we tend to have a fear that we need to complete our work or do more, and that's not done. My to-do list is so large, and this just the belief that, oh, if my work was done, I wouldn't have a job. Oh, this work is here because it is supposed to be here, and also this work is here because I really enjoy it, hopefully. And so if it was done, if it was empty, there's a lot of negative consequences to that. Like you may be fired, you may lose meaning. And so accepting the fact that, oh, cool, I work tomorrow. Great. I don't have to do it till 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah. I think I wish I could tell myself that 15 years ago, maybe longer, because I think, in the corporate world, I couldn't wrap my head around that. It seemed like I was always thinking about work all the time. And eventually it is a skill to learn that, okay, yeah, if I were to complete all this, that would be a good thing for me. And I need to kind of learn how to, I remember somebody just gave me the analogy of it's like a switch. You just got to get to know when to turn it off. And you got to do it in the right way, but that's part of the skill. But I think there's you could save people a lot of probably stress and health problems just from just giving that analogy. Work's not supposed to be done.
Mm-hmm. I wish I could, and I actually probably will, because I've had some volunteer opportunities lately, is just go try to tell these tips to people in junior high, people in high school, people in college, people starting their first job. Can make a pretty big difference. And so I'm focusing on work stuff, but I'm happy to talk about personal stuff. But the external one was, if you want to be promoted, act like you've already been promoted. And I work with a lot of clients who want to grow in their professional career, and they are waiting for their organization to do something. They're waiting for their boss to do something. They've told them once that they want to be promoted. Or during the performance review, when their promotions are supposed to come in, they mention it. And they're disappointed that it doesn't happen. We have to be in control of our careers. That means that you need to go to your manager, you need to sit them down, and you have to say, I'm really impressed with how far you've gotten in your career. Can you teach me a little bit about how you've gotten there? Awesome. Thanks for sharing that story. What would I have to do to move up in my career? When do you think that might be possible? Can we make a map? Can we break that down? What if I wanted to do it in 6 months instead of 12, or instead of 14 or 15? Great. Can we check in on that? Can I bring this to our one-on-ones? Awesome. Thanks. I don't know many employees, maybe you do, Ryan, that have ever had that conversation with their manager.
No.
And then brought it up every single week, every single one-on-one to check in on progress. Have asked them to maybe schedule meetings with their skip level, so the manager's manager, or with cross-functional partners that are responsible for their promotions. I even met with a client once who we're only meeting for executive coaching for them to be promoted. It was hired by their organization. And I go, great. What's the criteria for you to be promoted? How are they grading you in the interviews?
Yeah.
Go ahead. I don't know. Let's go get that information.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's, again, this is my experience. I think number one, a lot of companies, especially companies, people I've worked with, companies don't have a clear idea of what it is they're actually looking for, right? And it kind of differs from manager to manager. So companies that have like a clear set of whatever, of skills, qualifications or whatnot, I think that's one thing that I see. Either that or just that they kind of get tricked by the structure of corporations where everything it's got to work in a certain order where they can't violate that. Otherwise they're kind of, puts a target on them. I've seen the kind of those two mentalities in that. So.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but does any of the strategies resonate for you? And then if one doesn't come up, I can share another one.
Well, here, I've got the book right here. Let me go, because I noticed I had a couple pages folded. Okay, so this is one that I was interested in this one because it kind of struck me as an experiment. And it was, the things you worry about today won't be the things you care about in the future. And without going on too long here, like I think about, like I have two 2-year-old boys, which I talk about in here all the time. But, you know, they're past the baby phase. They're like little people. And I'm like, oh my gosh, when they were little, you know, I was worried about, you know, crap, I forgot to pay this bill and now there's a late fee. And I was stressed out about that for a whole day or something like that, or some responsibility, or something like that. And I don't remember what that was, you know? And so the things that struck me, because the things that tend to be most concerned about, I don't remember what it was a year ago. But what I do remember is when my boys were 1 a year ago, and I only wanted to be present to that. So that one really stuck out to me.
Oh, I love that you brought that up. Just this idea that like some of the most stressful moments in our life day to day we're never going to remember just blows me away. And if we can somehow like put this on t-shirts and then everybody just wear that, like, it's okay, you won't remember, just those words, it's okay, you won't remember. I think we'd have a pretty cool world. Like that argument that got you so heated, the traffic that you were in, the bill that you received, like the customer service rep that just maybe didn't understand what you were saying. How much joy in life do you spend? Like, do you just lose on those types of moments? There's a couple other passages that kind of relate to that. Like, you know, never say no to a hug kind of thing, or always have time for a hug when someone comes to you if you value them in the relationship, like put everything aside. And it's just about like prioritizing where your energy is going to be best spent for you to live the life that you want. So really, I really love that you brought that up.
Yeah, it was relevant in a bunch of ways. It just gave me, I was having this experience before I read that. And that really, I was like, okay, now I have like a sentence where I can kind of work this experiment and be like, okay, what is it that, so since then, I've started, you know, I do this like kind of bullet journaling, and I just have one of those bullets now is the thing that kind of caused me the most stress that day. And it's the silliest things. So it's really given me some awareness. So I'll thank you, Dr. Ritter, for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for running the experiment, because the whole purpose of the book is to do those 3 things that I kind of shared. And one of those is action. And so you have that learning, and you have that action, and then you have that reflection. And so you're doing it, and it makes me so happy. And that's how I learned. One of the reasons why I wrote the book in that structure is because I'll go through like a 300 or 400 page book and be like, the one thing, what's the one thing that really resonated with me? And then maybe I can take that, maybe I can do something with it. But I just wanted a book that focused on how I've learned, which is I saw something, I read something, it resonated with a problem that I was having in my life, and I was motivated to take action to do it. I was just uncomfortable enough to go take some action to learn and then hopefully change something.
Yeah. And that was and I think that's the beauty of sort of, just to comment on the way that the book is written, is I made sure I was very careful to find a word here, because it's very digestible. And I think that's important, because there's been a lot of books that I really liked, and it required some effort to try to sort of get through them. And the way this is not, like with the sort of takeaway on the right side of the page and kind of the detail on the left, it really, I don't know, I'm like, I remember I was reading it, and this is a passing thought. I was like, this is probably how more and more books are going to be written, because it kind of gives you it kind of reminds me like a file folder. You can flip the one page and be like, oh, this, but what exactly does that mean? You can go over to the other stuff here on the left side of the page.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And it's this, at least how I learn. And it's not just like mantras and stuff, but there's something about having a line that's easy to remember, as you just shared, that can help build the pause between stimulus and reaction. And if we can build that pause, there's so much power. Because then we can take control, like you said. You can make that choice. Do I give in to the fear, and do I live afraid, or do I process the fear as a data point of the world around me, and then make a conscious decision intentionally towards what I want? It's not saying ignore the emotions. It's not just all logic, because emotions are important. I want us to make decisions based on joy and love and excitement and meaning. I also want us to choose them more often than not over stress and frustration and patience. And what you just said is that if we can have that kind of mantra, that affirmation in a way to build that pause, then we can maybe live a little bit more fearlessly.
Yeah, I love that nod to sort of Viktor Frankl there, because I think that you're right. There is so much power in that space. And I think what you can find there, and I guess you sort of implied this, is that you can be intentional with experiencing joy, and not just the first thing, the frustrated feeling that comes up, or the tightness that your body, provides for you when you're stressed out, that you're like, okay, I have to be stressed out now. You can be like, oh, wait a second. I'm going to close my eyes, take a deep breath, and sort of, kind of de-stress my body with this. And I think having that space, that's the power to it.
Yeah. And I can be overly goal-oriented, and I can be overly logical, and I can feel like work is more important. And there's a passage in the book. It's like, remember, the titles changed when we were editing so much. I don't remember the exact titles, but it's like, remember your joy, like experience the magnificence of the world that you're in. Remember that you're in this like ball of rock hurtling through space. And just like, basically it's remember to have fun. And it's so simple, but I forget it all the time. And I wear a tree of life. I recommend that everyone have some sort of anchor on them that represents a core value or a testament to like how they want to live their life. And if you don't know what the word anchor means, just check it out and look up neuro-linguistic programming. And it's just this tree of life on my wrist. And for me, what it means is everything's connected. I am that, you are that, all is that. And we are everything. I am you, you are me. This idea that like we all come from the same cosmic stardust. I know it sounds a little woo-woo, so sorry everyone if you're like, Ben, you were logical, you had me up till now, but now you lost me. But it reminds me that the things that a lot of times that I worry about are not that important, and that we are all, it's kind of fake. Like we are in this world that we don't know how it exists, and we're just kind of here living a life. Like our jobs are this construct of humanity that we've developed over time. Like work wasn't a thing, we just lived. And so everything we live, everything that we do is just some component of life that's been told to us and some social norm over time. So really it is all kind of fake. And so why not have some fun? And that is a really strong and important point when it comes to building this pause again to how do you want to really live your life, and who do you want to be, and how do you want to show up? Yeah.
I just was listening to something today. I had like a podcast on in the back, and it was some pretty renowned astrophysicists. They were all arguing for the fact that we're in a simulation. It was for different reasons. They were arguing for the reasons. I'm like, and I was listening to it, and I remember thinking, is this just a foregone conclusion now that this is just all a video game? It's interesting. So.
Well, then I think this is a cheat code because it's made my life a lot better.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it. I love that. So when you think about, or when you're coaching people and the idea of risk taking comes up, or recklessness, how do you distinguish between healthy risk taking and recklessness when it comes to kind of going after your ambitions?
I'm trying to think about individuals that I've worked with that have wanted to do things that weren't going to serve them. And I guess that could be a risk, which is you're going to do this thing that ultimately is not going to serve you. And oftentimes that is just destructive behavior. It is like negative habits, addictions. They're living a life out in the opposite direction. Because when people hear the word risk taking, it's like jump out of a plane. Cool. You know what? Go have fun, wear a parachute. You know, people have different levels of adventure. But I see more so risk taking as, hey, I'm going to go launder this money. I'm going to go cheat on my spouse. I'm going to do things that are just off brand and not, I'm judging, wrong for if someone wants to live a life that is authentic and is value aligned. Now people live that life. If they want to do it, let them do it. There's no judgment, but my clients generally want to live a life that is more along the lines of a values driven and mission driven world. And sadly, we live in an environment that it's easy to get lost. It's easy not to follow who you want to be. And I'm not sure if this is what you meant by risk taking. So I'm going to turn it back to you and see if what you had in mind.
No, I think that, so just like anything, I think you kind of answered saying, well, it depends on sort of the individual, but the way that you kind of identify that is whether or not it's serving them. Right. So it might be different for you than it is for me, and something might be seen as more reckless or high risk for me, and it might not be for you.
So the first thing we do in terms of clarity when I work with a client who's a little bit lost, because not everyone's lost, but it's to explore and define and align their values. Explore, define, align. So you figure out what your values are. Who am I? What do I stand for? Define them. What does this mean to me? A word or a phrase is just meaningless without your definition. And then how do I align this to my life? Where do I rank right now in terms of how I'm living, how I'm showing up in each area of my life, work, relationship, self, etc. And then how do I what can I do to align myself more to that? That could be any spectrum of risk, depending on what you want to create. And I'm ultimately of this belief that you're going to be okay. We're not going to do things that are just going to leave you homeless, because it's probably not the smartest thing to do. And so generally, in terms of risk, is this something that could financially destroy your life? Is this something that could destroy your relationships? Is this something that could destroy your business? Is this something that could destroy your brand? I think there's certain severities of risk. And then you coach from there to say, okay, so that's a really innovative solution, but it could potentially ruin you, right? At least for a couple of years, maybe 7 years. I've known people in my life, and I think if you've studied successful people, most of them have at one point been broke, and not broke in the beginning, broke after they grew their business and then lost everything, or divorced, or there's certain levels of risk. It's like, what do you believe in yourself to be able to build up from nothing or rebuild? Yeah.
So it's like, okay, it's almost like, what cost are you willing to pay for this potential move? And is that going to be worth it? A lot of times, if you just look and say, this could end up ruining your brand, that just kind of puts a word on the cost.
Yeah. And how I believe in change is that you don't have, most of the time, at least the clients that I work with, is that you tend to have everything that you need. We just have to make some slight adjustments. And completely wiping the slate clean and starting over is often too much for someone to handle. And facing your fear doesn't mean ripping the Band-Aid off completely. It means figuring out, like, how can we move this Band-Aid just a little bit so it doesn't hurt so much? And that's really where learning and growth comes from. And that's where people actually get stuck. They go, I really want to work out, but I have to do it 7 days a week. And so when I miss one day, I can't go any of the days, because I've already not done 7. And you can kind of replay this for anything. And so no one takes action because it's just too overbearing. And so you have to kind of find what's the slight adjustment to help someone start taking steps towards their life. It builds up little wins. It creates greater levels of confidence. You need confidence to take action and take control. And then you can kind of grow from there, and you can make some greater changes. Like your relationship example, approach one person that you think is going to reject you. Great. Okay, you did 1. Now let's do 5. Okay, great. Well, now stick around for like 10 seconds. Try not to leave for one of the conversations. So you slowly start building up this like sense of self, which we have to do in our life overall. You're listening to this and you're like, Ben, that sounds so scary. You're like, great. What's one thing that's a little uncomfortable that you haven't done yet that you can maybe do? Like someone that's afraid of speaking up. Well, agree with someone next meeting. Just agree with them. Say, great point, Joanne. That was wonderful. And do that for the next week. Okay. After that. And it's just slowly building up a little sense of self and fearlessness over time.
Yeah. I think there's something about the small steps, and there's almost an implication there about deciding what something's going to mean, right? So there's what does it mean if I'm rejected, right? And putting yourself in that experience and then kind of intentionally defining it. I think it gives you some sense of empowerment.
When it comes to motivation, you want to get in doing things that are new. You want to get to the point where you want it. And so there's different ways to do that. Like, for example, if you want to start going to the gym, they tell you to put your clothes out the day before or sleep in them. That's great. Let's go a step further though. Break it up into a bunch of steps. It's going to take you a long time to go to the gym, but it's worth it because you're going to start building an interest. Wear your clothes, sleep in them, wake up, don't go to the gym. Do that for a week. Wear the clothes, wake up, get in the car, don't drive. Do that for a week. Next, get in the car, drive to the gym, sit in the parking lot. Do that for a week. You're going to get to the point where you're like, I just want to go into the gym.
Yeah, that's great.
And then go into the gym and don't work out. Like what you're doing is you're building the habit. You're changing your routine. You're taking away the fear. You're focusing on the steps. And everyone's different. Might not work for you. But there's basically, when we think about like, oh, I really want to do that. I don't think I can do it. Well, you can. It must make it. They take a little bit of time. If you're trying to achieve something, very often we get focused on how we get there. So maybe we see an expert that's doing something and we're like, we have to do it this way. But then that way doesn't work out, or that way doesn't work for us. And we get afraid that we're never going to be able to do it. And the goal, like the outcome can stay the same, but the path to get there can change. And so there's 2 consistent things generally that I'd like to look at if we're feeling afraid. It's where do I want to go? So what do I want to achieve? And then why am I doing it? The why I'm doing it, the value is critical because that's your motivation. That's like the thing that gets you up in the morning that helps you stay committed. And then the thing that you're working towards that's where you're headed. Everything in between is infinite in terms of how you can get there. And effort, commitment, serendipity, innovation, thinking time can build a road, and that road can crumble. And it often does. I think I've changed my business's tagline 4 times before I settled on the one it was. Talk to anyone starting a new business. Give yourself 3 to 5 years. Like almost every major business is out there started as something else before it became the thing that it is today. And so goal, path changed. And so I think Bill, even without being sure of the actual passage, because I understand the idea of like journey more than destination, but this is more around if to stay motivated to face your fear. Don't worry about that path crumbling because you can just jump on another one.
Don't feel like your way is the right way. Instead, focus on the final product and then kind of trust your team to do it.
Yeah.
I just sort of pulled that out of context when I noticed when I opened the book earlier today.
Yeah, we get so stuck as professionals, even if we're not managers, that, the person isn't designing the slides the right way. We forget that if we're all working in the same organization, we're all on the same team. And so we have this fear that we're going to look bad, or we have this fear that it's maybe going to get placed on us, or whatever that fear is related to. And we lose sight of the bigger vision, which is if I create really positive relationships here and we get to the same outcome, my career is better off. I'm better off.
Well, Dr. Ritter, as we come close to our time here, I want to be respectful of your time. What haven't I asked you that maybe I should have, or you thought we'd get into?
Well, what's started me into this like business model was after I experienced that with soccer, and I dove into confidence and how to be motivated and how to have clarity and have direction and confidence, all those things. I gave a talk, and that talk launched my career in this space. And it was titled, "The Worst Advice I Ever Received Was Find Your Purpose." And I don't often get to talk about this that much because I generally am coming on shows and talking about fearlessness and self-leadership. But I can't let go of my roots. So I was so invested in an outcome that I made that outcome more important than me. And we're here to talk about personal success. And I hope that people listening, no matter what your goals are, have learned or are coming to the realization that the thing that they're trying to achieve is something they created. Generally influenced by maybe your parents, by your environment, by your school, by your TikToks or your Instagram, whatever, your books or your podcasts. But ultimately, like you kind of like brought it into being. You decided you wanted to invest in it. You made a decision that it was important. And so when you come to a decision, if you should focus on that goal or your health, I really hope you pick your health. Or when you realize that that goal is impacting your health, I really hope you pick your health. And even further, if you realize that goal is keeping you from your kids and you're really negatively impacting the relationship, because I understand you make sacrifices and stuff. Or if you realize that goal is keeping you from your partner or whatever it is, that you prioritize yourself, because nothing you create can be more important than you. And I made my purpose more important than me, and I forgot that I'm the one that created it. So no matter what, and never could it be more important than who I was. And people sometimes say, well, your purpose is more important. It was given to you from this universe and from above. I'm like, no, I made this. It exists because I decide that it does. And so because of that, I'm going to choose it. I exist over it if it ever comes to a fight.
I absolutely love that, because there's so much in what you said. There's the realization that you're doing it for a reason, and often if it's to better your health. So if it's harming your health, that's probably a reason to sort of divert energies. You're doing it to have more connection. So if it's harming your relationships with your children, that's just very powerful and very simply said. So I think that's a great way to end things. So thank you for your insight, and thank you for your wisdom, and thanks for the great discussion.
Thank you, Ryan. I loved it.
Good. Well, I hope we get a chance to talk again.
Same. Come down to Austin. Let's go get some barbecue, walk on the lake, talk about success and fearlessness.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you, Dr. Ritter. Appreciate you.
I hope you felt what I felt in this conversation with Dr. Benjamin Ritter. Not just inspiration, but a reframing of fear. One thing he said that keeps echoing in my mind is this, quote, "I made my purpose more important than me, and I forgot that I'm the one who created it." That hits different when you realize how many of us are doing that quietly, measuring our worth against goals we didn't consciously choose. It reminds me of a question I often ask in coaching. What if this fear is not something to fix, but something to just get curious about? So I want to leave you with that, not as a challenge, but as an invitation. What story have you been telling yourself about fear? And what new story might be waiting underneath it? If you feel stirred by what you heard, take a small and courageous step. you can schedule a complimentary coaching consultation at ryanwantslifecoaching.com/schedule. It's a safe place to find real clarity and someone to walk beside you with that clarity. Until next time, remember, you're not behind. You're becoming. All the best.